We begin tonight with the Central Bank of Nigeria's decision to keep the monetary policy rate at 27.5% for the second consecutive time this year. This follows last year's MPR hikes 6 times in a row. The CBN says the decision is based on recent improvements in macroeconomic indicators, including about 1% drop in headline inflation to 23.7% last month. Food inflation also fell slightly to 21.26% from 21.79%, while core inflation eased by nearly 1% to 23.39%. News Central's business correspondent Chairman Dabeng has more.
Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee for the second time has made a unanimous decision to retain the monetary policy rate at 27.5%. According to Olayemi Cardoso, the decision is based on improvements in the Nigerian economy as inflation begins to slow down, coupled with relative stability in FX and oil prices.
1. Retain the MPR at 27.50%. 2. Retain the asymmetric corridor around the MPR at plus 500 to minus 100 basis points. 3. Retain the cash reserve ratio of deposit money banks at 50% and merchant banks at 16%. 4. Retain the liquidity ratio at 30%.
Cardoso also spoke on the need to boost foreign currency earnings through oil and non-oil exports, further emphasizing the need to make Nigeria investor-friendly.
Without investments, economies don't grow. Investors don't go to where there's instability. So I think that is the first thing to understand. On the journey, and this is a journey, investors don't go out to invest to lose money. They go out to invest because there's stability in an economy and they can plan.
The Central Bank of Nigeria says it is optimistic in the growth and stability of the Nigerian economy and adds that it is working to ensure that the nation finds some respite from the recent harsh realities. Reporting for News Central Abuja, I am Chamun Dabeng.
Meanwhile, some economists are questioning the CBN's decision. The managing director of financial derivatives company, Bismarck Rwani, says the numbers just don't add up, suggesting possible technical flaws or misrepresentations in the data collection process. He noted that it is strange that food is more expensive in producing states and cheaper in consuming ones, calling the figures curious, in quote, and in need of closer scrutiny. Well, let's bring in financial expert Mukhtar Mohammed to help us take a closer look at the numbers that Rwani is questioning. Mukhtar, I'll start by asking you, these numbers are often so clunky to understand. Help us make sense of it. What does this mean for the average household in Nigeria?
Yeah, same of same. Good evening for having me. Still same of same. What we're going through, we continue to go through it. There's nothing has changed. The CBN have remained and left rate at what it was. So what it means is that businesses will still keep borrowing at a high rate. Inflation will still be high like it is. For me, nothing has really changed over the CBN policy. What we are saying is the same of same. What is expected, the normal orthodox monetary policy, not taking into consideration our economic reality on ground. I think it just remains the same. I think that's all I can say.
Well, Mukhtar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Fabulous. So, Rwani is a well-decorated economist. Could he be wrong for questioning the Apex Bank's data collection process again? And do you share his sentiments?
I don't think he's wrong because, again, like I always say, when you look at the reality on the ground, compare with the data you are using. They didn't just add up. The reality on the ground is inflation is high. The Nigerian Bureau of Statistics is saying inflation is low. Based on that, CBN will give its own decision. I think it doesn't really add up at all. When you look at that, again, then you look at the unemployment data that says that they are using, the parameter they are using to calculate unemployment. They said for every Nigerian that work 1 hour in a week is employed. So all these things are flawed. So definitely I'm not surprised when he says it's flawed, because he also does his own. Remember, I always give the monthly MBS business review, and he knows the reality. The reality on the ground is that cost of living is still very high, despite the reduction in terms of PMS, which the CBN was mentioned in their report. But when you look at that reduction, it does not bring down the cost of transportation, especially in Lagos. Rather, compensation is still high. What has happened is that the rich homes, cars are able to see fuel at a lower rate today. But the poor are still paying so much in terms of transportation. And they are the ones that are the end users, and also they are the ones that are the market women selling product. Definitely they will add that to it. And that's why inflation is still high. The only place the CBN is saying they should do something to control inflation for me is the FX rate. But unfortunately, this same CBN moved the FX rate to meet up with the parallel market. And since then, they've not been able to bring it to, to par with both the FS and the parallel market and the official market. But they pride themselves that they brought stability. I wonder what type of stability. I keep saying there's no stability in the exchange. What we have seen in the exchange is we have seen a corridor of stability.
But then again, can you talk us through the collection process of the data? If we're having a serious disconnect between what the CBN is saying and what a renowned economist like Rawani and as well as yourself, an analyst, you're saying that something is wrong somewhere. Talk us through the process and what you think could be missing.
I think Rwanda is not just questioning the CBN data. It's actually questioning the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics data. And it's by that data, that's what the CBN base their decision on. And data are supposed to be collected from different sources. That's how you have to look at data from the south, from the southwest, from the market in the north central. All those data are supposed to be collected. And through that, you can begin to make your analysis. And if you look at that data, it said that 6 states, about 6 states are still having inflation as high above 30% from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. And what Rwanda is saying is that if you look at that data and by reality on ground, if you have to go to the market, the cost of living has not drastically reduced. So we can't be getting inflation at where it is. Remember that the current inflation data or number that we have, about 23 points, is largely driven by the rebasing of the economy, yes. Not really based on on some of these economic terms in terms of demand and supply, in terms of destruction in supply chain or improvement in supply chain. What we're seeing that brought our inflation down from almost 38% to where it is today was a rebasing. So, and again, rebasing in itself does not provide jobs. Rebasing creates an avenue to get more foreign investors into the market. But unfortunately, like the CBN governor had alluded to, the investors are not going to come when you don't have a stable exchange rate. You are struggling to maintain a fixed exchange rate. The exchange rate have not been able to maintain a fixed stability for a reasonable period of time. And so no investor will want to come in there. So those are part of what he's saying, that when you look at that data, by what is on ground, do they really go to the market? Where is their source of getting this data for? All of us are still asking that question. We've not gotten an answer from the CBN, nor from the National Bureau of Statistics.
Speaking of data, the price of staple food like rice has been dropping since March across the country. But we still have a long way to go with food inflation, as you have rightly mentioned, do you think?
I didn't get the question. Can you come again?
My question is, you have seen that the price of staple food like rice has been dropping since March. What does this say about food inflation?
Look, rice is dropping in terms when you look at it, see the cost of rice is dropping and other staple fruits. When you look at that, why it's making the price of rice drop is that we've still opened up our borders to importation of this rice. It's not that we are self-sufficient. And the exchange rate, like I said, have maintained a corridor of stability for some time. But when you look at the local rice, which is supposed to drive our economy, it's still very, very expensive because of cost of production. If you look at some of the staple foods also, they are not relatively down as we expect them to be. And you and I know what the challenges are, the insecurity in some of these heart of Nigerian food production capitals or states or community. So most of them have not been able to go to farm, especially in the north central, northeast, and also even in the middle belt, like Benue State, which happen to be the food basket of Nigeria. So what we say in terms of stability and stable food is largely driven sometimes by that corridor of stability, importing some of these goods from outside the shore of this country. The people in some of these farm settlements in Nigeria have not been able to go to farm. So for us to maintain that, to see those drastic drop in food price, then we need to look at improving security in those areas. I'm surprised that the CBN is saying that there seems to be relative security, peaceful, security have improved in some of those communities where we have those families. But that's different from what we are hearing in the news, what the government have been saying, what the military are saying is the cause of the insecurity. So sometimes that's why we keep saying that it sometimes seems like what is on ground is different from what they tell us whenever they come to give some of these numbers or tell us some of these things that are happening.
How do you compare the CBN's approach to monetary policy to other central banks in emerging markets?
Well, yeah, if you want to compare that, we are far behind. Because if you look at some emerging market, what they've been able to do thus far, you realize that they brought down inflation, they have stability in their exchange rate, even when they're forced to do policy like what we have done. Give an example, Ghana. Ghana has improved in its inflation numbers. Let's go further. Egypt that does the same thing, floating their currency like us. Their currency has been very stable. Inflation has been very low. Go to Kenya. Kenya inflation was almost 22%. But as today, they are almost doing single-digit inflation because of what? They did a policy that we plan to do and we've not done it thus far, which is bring down, remove tariff on household items. We didn't do that, that was the game changer in Kenya. So when you look at our inflationary figure based emerging market, we are still very far. Our inflation is still very high compared to what our neighbor here, Ghana, not even talking about Kenya or talking about South Africa. And when you look at our currency itself is very volatile compared to some of these countries that I just mentioned. So that tells you that we're really not done well. And the challenge is, I keep saying, if we do the copy and paste method, we do what and the CBN said they will not get out of that orthodox orthodox economic policy, bring down rates, reduce liquidity in the system. We need to look inward. What really is our challenge? Our challenge is not largely driven by supply chain, so you do this, you do that, or liquidity. When you reduce liquidity for the system, you're killing one of the most vibrant sector of the Nigerian economy, which is the informal sector. And the CBN alluded to that also in their report. And so I, for one, don't think that we are getting that right, because we've not looked at indigenously to deal with our economic issue. Rather, we are still dealing with the World Bank and IMF policy to drive down and growth in our economy. Because what we see in the economy is that the CBN is trying to make our economy attractive for foreign investors first, before they begin to think to make it attractive for locals.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there for now. Mukhtar Mohammed, a financial expert, thank you so much for joining us tonight. The Federal Ministry of Finance has pledged to release withheld payments within 48 hours following a protest by members of the Trade Union Congress and the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengasan, on Tuesday. Members of the unions had picketed the ministry and demanded the immediate release of pension arrears, unpaid allowances, and other entitlements owed to staff, especially those under the Nigerian Nuclear Regulatory Authority. Responding to the protest, Permanent Secretary in charge of Special Duties, Raymond Omachi, assured the workers that their concerns have been conveyed directly to the minister. Welcome back. You're watching Tonight on News Central. I'm Adeshawa Josh. A reminder of our top stories. Central Bank of Nigeria keeps interest rates unchanged at 27.5% for a second time in a row. Senate passes for second reading bill seeking to establish agency to manage assets recovered from unlawful activities. And UK suspends trade talks with Israel over military conduct in Gaza, where hundreds of Palestinians were killed in recent days. The Senate on Tuesday passed for second reading a bill seeking to amend the proceeds of crime recovered in the Recovery and Management Act 2022. This proposal will establish a new centralized agency to oversee the management of assets and properties recovered from unlawful activities. The bill is sponsored by Senator Idiat Oluranti Adebule, and it aims to enhance accountability, transparency, and efficiency by removing asset management responsibilities from the 18 agencies currently empowered to prosecute and manage recovered properties. Leading the debate on the Senate floor, Senator Adebule described the current legal framework as inefficient and riddled with overlapping responsibilities. A bill seeking the approval of more than 1.2 trillion naira for capital projects in the Federal Capital Territory budget from the administration's statutory revenue fund account for the year 2025 has passed the second reading in the House of Representatives. The amount, which is part of the total sum of about 1.7 trillion naira proposed for this year's fiscal the fiscal year, was passed following a motion raised by the majority leader of the House, Julius Nyabere, and a voice vote by the majority of lawmakers during plenary. Also, the sum of about 150 billion naira, which was proposed for personal costs, with an additional 343 billion naira earmarked for overhead costs, passed the second reading.
To move that the bill for an act to authorize the issue from the Federal Capital Territory Administration's Statutory Revenue Fund of the Federal Capital Territory Administration account the total sum of 1,783,823,788,392 naira only, of which the sum of 150,353,906,168 naira only is for personal costs. Honorable David, you are welcome. And the sum of 343 billion.
FCT Minister Nyesom Wike says he will embark on 19 days of project commissioning as part of activities earmarked to celebrate the second-year anniversary of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration. This was part of the decisions taken on Tuesday at the FCTA's 14th Executive Committee meeting. A statement by the Minister's Senior Special Assistant on Public Communications and Social Media, Larry Olayinka, says the commissioning of projects will commence on June the 10th and will go on for 19 days. Some of the projects scheduled for commissioning are the newly renovated Abuja International Conference Center and bus terminals in Kubo and Mabushi, as well as Akpo Wasa Road, among others. We have fresh updates from Ibadan, where a schoolboy was shot and killed in the early hours of Tuesday by a stray bullet allegedly fired by a policeman. The incident began when policemen reportedly attempted to chase the boy's father after he allegedly violated a traffic signal. Eyewitnesses say one of the policemen fired at the fleeing vehicle to disable it by targeting its tires when the bullet struck the child, who was in the car with his father. He was immediately rushed to a nearby hospital but was confirmed dead on arrival. The police have yet to issue a statement regarding the shooting. In other news, as ECOWAS marks its 50th anniversary, the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, in collaboration with the Conrad Adenauer, hosted a historic gathering in Lagos to reflect on the journey of West Africa's foremost regional bloc. News Center's correspondent Israel Ethrobo has the details.
It was a celebration not just of an institution, but of an idea. ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, turned 50 this year.
We had eruptions in Liberia, and the world looked the other way. And there was everything to suggest that that was going to take a different shape and dynamic that may have consumed the whole of West Africa. So ECOWAS took the initiative, and that's the first peacekeeping force that was set up, established through local sources, through local initiatives, and through local interventions.
The father of the day was none other than General Yakubu Gowon, Nigeria's former head of state and the founding father of ECOWAS.
Yes, visionary, probably you can say yes, but founding fathers, it is all of us, to start off with, who pushed the idea together, but all the others, 15 or 16 of them, later on reduced to 15 years. So that was what happened, and it was done here in Lagos at the Federal Palace Hotel.
Chaired by former Minister of External Affairs, Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, the event also featured policy thinkers and political voices, including SDP presidential candidate Adewale Adebayo.
We saw the presence of General Yakubu Gowon, who was actually the brainchild, inspired by the cause of the civil war in Nigeria, that Africa needs to think beyond the borders of individual countries.
The presence of international partners, including the German Consul General in Lagos and the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, underscored the global interest in ECOWAS survival and relevance.
Under Gowon's stewardship and the vision of the founding fathers, ECOWAS embarked on a transformative mission, one that has borne remarkable fruits. We have witnessed strides in trade liberalization, the facilitation of free movement, the strengthening of democratic governance, and robust peacekeeping interventions that have already been mentioned today and that have safeguarded stability in member states.
Can the bloc reinvent itself for the next 50 years? That's the question stakeholders here are hoping will be answered with unity, reform, and renewed purpose. In Lagos, for News Central, Israel Ifirobo.
To judicial matters, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Kudirat Kekereekun, has tasked judges of the lower courts to uphold integrity and the ethical standards of the judiciary. The Chief Judge of the Apex Court gave the charge while inducting newly appointed magistrates and judges of Sharia and customary courts at the National Judicial Institute in Abuja. Our correspondent Joshua Imaraye has the details.
Activity open.
It was the opening ceremony of the induction course for newly appointed magistrates and judges of Sharia and customary courts at the National Judicial Institute in Abuja. The Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Kudirat Kekereekun, represented by Justice Chidebere Uwa, charged the new members of the bench to guard their integrity jealously and resist any conduct that could compromise the ethical and professional standards of the judiciary.
Judicial independence is not just a constitutional imperative. It is the bedrock of public trust in the justice system. I also urge you to guard your integrity jealously, be vigilant against corruption in any guise, and allow your conduct to reflect the highest standards of ethics and professionalism. Avoid perception of bias or undue interest in any matter before you. Approach your duties with humility and a clear understanding of the immense trust placed in you by Nigerians.
The administrator of the National Judicial Institute, Justice Salisu Abdullahi, urged the new judges to strike a balance, resolving disputes swiftly while upholding fairness, impartiality, and thoroughness.
And be rest assured that, in view of their proximity to the grassroots, their decades will often be filled with large volume of cases. You must therefore strive to create a healthy balance, one that guarantees the resolution of disputes within a reasonable time, while upholding the highest standard of truthfulness, impartiality, and fairness. Understand that the position will now acquire all paramount significance within the very foundation of our judicial structure.
Justice Abdullahi also revealed that the Institute will soon embark on a nationwide assessment tour to evaluate how its training programs are impacting judicial performance. In Abuja for News Central, I am Joshua Imalayi.
Still ahead tonight, Sudanese army pushes rebels completely out of Khartoum. Details of this and more after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Outside our shores, Sudan's military says it has fully cleared the paramilitary rapid support forces from Khartoum state, marking a major shift in the two-year conflict. The army announced the development in a statement declaring Khartoum state completely free of rebels. This follows weeks of heavy fighting, including in the capital city of Omdurman, where the military launched what it described as a large-scale offensive. In March, the army regained control of the capital city, including the presidential palace, for the first time in nearly 2 years. The RSF has not yet responded to the latest claims. Britain has suspended free trade negotiations with Israel in its strongest rebuke yet of the ongoing military campaign in Gaza. Addressing the House of Commons on Tuesday, Foreign Secretary David Lammy called the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, quote, abominable, and described Israel's military tactics as dangerous, repellent, and monstrous. Lammy accused the Israeli government of enforcing a starvation strategy, citing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's comments that only the bare minimum of food should be allowed into Gaza, just enough to prevent hunger, end of quote. Well, let's bring in international journalist Adeni Kunu, who joins us from Chicago, while a policy analyst, Dr. Victor Ohai, joins me from Lagos. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us to take a closer look at this story. The threats of sanctions on Israel are not new, but to see the UK willing to suspend trade deals with Israel is quite a thing. How significant is this shift in UK support for Israel? I'll start with you, Mr. Okunu.
That the level of humanitarian crisis is enough to make any human being with blood flowing in his or her veins to actually to cry out. But another thing is you cannot look at just one side of the conversation, because it is easy to look at the carnage, to look at the death and destruction for some people, but to look away from what prompted this is what I'd not like us to actually talk about. We know that a couple of years ago, the Palestinians actually attacked Israelis while there was a music festival. And oftentimes you never can tell what is going to be the extent of the reprisals you have when such an attack has gone. And it hurts me to my bones to see that children who cannot fight or defend themselves, vulnerable women, and of course, you're talking about young children, apart from, the babies here, have been terribly affected. But when you look at what the United Kingdom has done, it appears as if some other countries that are known as natural allies, effortless allies of Israel, are beginning to rethink their partnership. We're talking about the free trade talks. We're talking about refusing to send about 30 out of 350 ammunition to the United Kingdom to continue to prosecute the war. You're also talking about the position of the European Union with regard to this. But one thing that I'd also like us to have the West talk about is the fact that Hamas has not relented. We know without a doubt that the bombarding of Gaza and many other places around that region is unbearable, and the proportion is actually indescribable. But anytime they're having a conversation about Israel stopping or Israel discontinuing the kind of thing that is happening in the Gaza region, it is important for them to talk about Hamas itself, the need for Hamas to stop. Because they're not relenting, please. Yes, please.
Before I go to Dr. Ohai, Adeni, just hear me out on this one. You mentioned the amount of suffering that we're seeing in Israel now. That suffering has been there since it began. So what suddenly changed the UK's position on this issue is what everybody is asking. Why the shift now?
The reality is this, and I need us not to get it wrong. I sympathize with those who have been killed in Gaza. But much more than the emphasis on the despoliation of Gaza and the destruction of lives and property, let's also remind ourselves that Israel has also suffered certain level of casualty. But for me at this point, even if it is obvious for all to see that the Palestinians are suffering more, it is also important for those talking about creating more or less like prevention of further destruction,
right,
to also try to speak to the issue of what is happening from the side of Hamas. It's a terrible thing happening out there.
I get
and
that.
I tell you, I don't know how many more years it will take them to recover from this
Let me
destruction.
bring in Victor now. Israel's foreign minister says this decision will backfire on UK's economy. What are the trade-offs for the UK?
Okay, no, let me get your question again, please.
Israel's foreign minister says, well, this is only going to make your economy worse, so you can go ahead and do your worst. What are the trade-offs for the UK?
Well, for the UK, first let me attempt to answer the question you asked my dear friend and brother Kunu earlier on about what has changed in the UK's position. I think it is obvious now that the European Union and the UK have, since Trump came in, have found out that it's no longer business as usual. In the past, as allies, they will blindly support whatever the US supports. But now they are willing to look at things through clearer glasses, not foggy glasses of blind support and loyalty, as they have always done in the past. So what has simply changed is the fact that there's a Trump right now who is no longer, I mean, America may be their friend, but Trump certainly is not. And so right now, they are willing to look at things more critically rather than support blindly. And in terms of trade in their relationships with Israel, all that is being redefined right now. I think they have since found out that, you know, it's time to begin to look beyond the U.S. because, again, it's about Trump, the Trump factor. It's no longer the way things used to be. So for them right now, they are willing to look at other trade partners, look at other relationships, redefine, you know, the kind of relationships they've always had in the past, which for Trump, as far as Trump was concerned, was parasitic because it seemed to have been only one way, and now it's no longer business as usual.
Right.
Let them fight, let every man, you know, find his way, and that's exactly what's happening right now.
And to your point about this growing body of European countries coming together to threaten Israel, do you see a unified Europe against Israel? Do you see that's ever going to happen?
Well, again, the Europeans cannot pretend to be even saints at this time. You remember that anti-Semitism has always been there. I mean, if not for America, it still is there. It's always there. In fact, wherever, I mean, Europe, you saw that during the World War, they were always against the Jews. You remember the massacre and, you know, what happened in Auschwitz, where they were gassed as well. So it's just bringing back things that were suppressed in the past, you know. So it's not going to be new. It was just the American factor and the fact that America was a benefactor to Europe as a whole and was protecting them, you know, as part of NATO, you know, against attacks from countries like former USSR, now Russia, and its allies. So, so Israel was never really like a friend to Europe as such. But what held them together was just the fear of America and what they were benefiting from America. America was dictating how things were going.
Adeni, the conflict in Gaza has obviously resulted in unimaginable humanitarian crisis. What steps do you think the international community can take at this time? Because obviously the threats they've issued in the last 2 years has really not done anything so far.
I think you must understand that the West understands where hypocrisy is and untruths. If you actually check, my brother Victor said something there. He was talking about the relationship between Israel and Europe. Let me say this, and it is important for the world to understand, that but for America perhaps we won't have a country called Israel today, which has been existing since 1948. And that is more or less like a seemingly eternal connection between them. So whenever we talk about the way forward, it is for Europe to actually stop anything that is hypocritical in how it deals with certain people in certain blocks of Europe, and also to look at the need for it to stand on the ground and mediate as fairly as possible. We know that this has been an intergenerational conflict that we may not see the end in sight. But what Europe can do right now is to reduce the level of carnage of unimaginable proportions that everyone is witnessing at the moment. So right now, if the UK and the European Union must come to the table, they must come to the table as fairly as possible so that Israel can understand that the role it is playing to reduce the carnage is actually unhypocritical, except that I do not know what we'll do. But at the moment, I think the UN must also hold a position that is superior. You're talking about the body that actually has over 180, 190 members. It is important for the United Nations to also act its role and not be like it is dangling like a pendulum when it comes to people's lives. When we gather, when they have their sessions, the UN Secretary General has to speak to this issue strongly and ensure that no side misunderstands the position it holds, not playing to the gallery. So until these unhypocritical positions are held and proper conversations are had, and there's a deliberate move by the superpowers, as it were, to mediate properly, unhypocritically, impartially, I think that we may still have long negotiations ahead of us. But I hope the end to this trouble is in sight. I have to say that.
I was listening to an analyst earlier who said there can never be a unified Europe with Germany's current stance on the issue. Germany is unequivocal in its support for Israel. Dr. Ohai, how do you respond to that?
Okay, so Germany finds itself in a moral quandary where whatever it does can be misunderstood. And so, you know, it cannot afford to go against Israel, even if it wants to, so that it does not appear to be anti-Semitism. They have had that for so long that they want to get rid of it. But let me quickly talk about the UN. There's very little the UN Secretary General can do, and the reason is because if there's an undemocratic institution, it is the UN. Let me explain what I mean by that. It is an institution that is governed or ruled by a minority. And among the minority, it is the minority vote that counts the most. What do I mean? At the Security Council, where you have 5 permanent members, it takes one to veto, and that veto will override the remaining 4 countries. So what it simply means is a rule of the minority over the majority. And so there's very little that even the UN Secretary General can do unless there's a unified voice. And unfortunately, the minority at the highest level will always have not just its say, but also its way. And in this case, it is what America says in one instant, or what any of the others may say if America goes another way. And that's the way, unfortunately, it's been structured. Until there's a change, I don't think that the UN has. I think it will just be a toothless move there.
All right. Yeah. Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there tonight. International journalist Adeni Ukunu, who's joining us from Chicago, and Dr. Victor Ohai, a policy analyst, who joined us from Lagos, I believe. Thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for having us. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Tonight returns with business news, sports, and entertainment. Please stay with us.
The governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Olayemi Cardoso, announced a significant reduction in foreign exchange market volatility, now below 0.5%, as monetary and fiscal reforms take effect. During a press briefing in Abuja after the 300th Monetary Policy Committee meeting, Cardoso attributed this improvement to policy consistency and transparency over the last 18 months. He noted that Nigeria's net external reserves have surged from $3 billion approximately to $23 billion, reflecting renewed investor confidence. And the CBN aims to boost diaspora remittance inflows to about $1 billion per month, enhancing Nigeria's economic stability. Away from that, the Nigerian Senate passed a second reading
of a bill aimed at amending the Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Act 2022 on Tuesday, sponsored by Senator Idayat Oluranti Adebule. The Proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Bill 2025 SB 343 proposes the creation of a centralized agency to manage assets recovered from unlawful activities. Adebule argued that the amendments would enhance accountability and efficiency by streamlining asset management away from 18 current agencies, addressing issues of poor coordination and transparency. Now, the bill received general support, though 2 senators voiced dissent. It has been referred to the Senate committee for further review. Looking at the Nigerian exchange market, it actually continued from yesterday and ended the day slightly positive, with the all-share index edging up by 0.03% to close at 109,730.47. Market capitalization also stood at about 68.96 trillion naira as investors weighed mixed performances across key sectors. And now to sectoral performance, the way we tracked it. The banking industry right here. Well, the banking industry actually dipped 0.35% as investor caution persists around recapitalization plans and possible tax burdens on forex revaluation gains. There you see the insurance gained 1.41%, continuing impressive run this year. Oil and gas at 2.88%, which actually is the biggest laggard that we've seen in a dip for that particular sector. Consumer goods 2.50% and growth industrial goods 0.03%, which is actually marginal. And that's how the market performed. And of course, business news for tonight. I am Lekon Onabanjo.
Thanks, Liko. Today, Koiki is standing by for the latest sports updates. 6 athletes sent home from the National Sports Festival for doping?
Well, not exactly sent home, just identified as having been banned by the World Anti-Doping Agency for anti-doping infractions. We'll have all that and much more after this break. Hello and welcome to Sports. The National Sports Commission today disqualified 6 athletes from the ongoing Gateway Games 2024 National Sports Festival due to anti-doping violations. The affected athletes are Marcus Okon, Ayabeke Okpeyemi, Karim Shukurat, Ogunshemilore Cynthia, Animashan Sophia, and Omole Joshua. The decision followed a joint meeting of the main and local organizing committees and aligns with the World Anti-Doping Agency Code. Still talking about the National Sports Festival, Rivers and Lagos State struck gold in the weightlifting event of the ongoing festival in Abeokuta, Ogun State. Ruth Myong and Rivers State and the African champion Omolala Onome Didi of Lagos State were the outstanding performers. Both weightlifters won 4 gold medals and 2 silvers for their states in the women's 49 kilogram and 55 kilogram categories respectively. Meanwhile, 2023 Africa Games gold medalist King Kalu of Cross River State bagged 3 gold medals for Cross Rivers with a total lift of 215 kilograms, comprising of 94 kilogram lift in the snatch and 121 kilograms in the clean and jerk in the men's 55 kilogram class. In the women's 45 kilogram class, Esther Amarachi Chinjoke of the invited junior athletes captured 2 gold medals in the clean and jerk with a total lift of 82 kilograms and 146 kilograms respectively, as she added a silver medal in the snatch with a lift of 64 kilograms. To tennis now. Nigeria's number 1 men's table tennis player, Quadri Aruno, has advanced to the round of 16 at the 2025 ITTF World Table Tennis Championships in Doha, Qatar, after a hard-fought 4-2 win over Germany's Benedikt Duda. The victory marks Aruno's first win over Duda since 2019. The Nigerian star claimed the win by taking 4 sets with scores of 11-9, 11-8, 12-10, and 11-9, displaying tactical brilliance and mental resilience throughout the match. His progression further cements his status as one of Africa's top table tennis talents and keeps Africa's hopes alive in the tournament as the only remaining player from the continent in the men's singles. He will face the winner of the match between Kazakhstan's Kirill Gerasimenko and Hugo Calderano of Brazil in the next round. Meanwhile, the Super Falcons head coach Justin Madugu has named 23 players for upcoming friendly matches against Cameroon's indomitable Lionesses. Key players include the likes of Captain Rashidat Ojibade, goalkeeper Chiamaka Nadozie, Michelle Alozie, Tony Payne, and Risola Babajide. Other call-ups feature Osinachi Ohale, Oluwatosin Dimehin, Shukurat Oladipo, Deborah Abiodun, Jennifer Chegini, Ifeoma Onumonu, and Francesca Odega. 6 players were also called up from the domestic scene. The first match takes place on May the 31st at Remo Star Stadium in Ikene, with the second on the 3rd of June at the MK Abiola Stadium in Abeokuta. Now, these fixtures form part of Nigeria's preparations for the 2024 Women's Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco, which is set to kick off in July. And all players are expected to report to camp in Ijebu-Ode on the 26th of May. Nigeria will face Tunisia, Algeria, and Botswana in Group B of the Africa Women's Cup of Nations.
In entertainment, the Nigerian box office grossed an impressive 3.48 billion naira in the first quarter of 2025. Now, it marks a 54.7% increase from the 2.25 billion naira in the first quarter of 2024. And massive, or should I say a massive 132% jump from the 1.5 billion in the first quarter of 2023. Now, this is, of course, according to Cinema Exhibitors Association of Nigeria. Now, audience turnout also grew. We're seeing about 661,801 tickets sold, a 10.9% rise from last year. Now, a lot of the credit goes to strong Nollywood and international releases. Over the past month, top earners from December to Mufasa, The Lion King, which raked in about 618 million naira, Alakada Bad and Bougie for 500 million naira, and Moana 2 with about 400 million naira in box office. Now, Funke Akindele and Tony Abraham dominated into the new year, of course, while Timini Eguson drew crowds with Real Love. I loved that one. And Yola Ajao's Owambe Thieves also raking in the numbers, and the impressive Labake Olododo by Iyabo Ojo. Let's not forget global hits Michael B. Jordan on Sinners also has a lot of people talking. I have friends who've seen that one 3 times. And I now want to ask Adeshoa, which of these films did you enjoy? Did you like any of them? Moana, maybe?
Oh God, how do you know I love cartoons? I'm not going to expose myself on air. So I do not confirm or deny your claims.
I mean, animes are an absolutely interesting one. I'm not going to lie to you. But I'm super impressed to see how we've seen the box office.
I am impressed too. I mean, it's great to see that this industry is finally getting the accolades it deserves, and of course the money it deserves. And I really just hope that it trickles down to the actors, the upcoming actors, the guys behind the scene, and you know, they just really deserve the flowers and the money.
You know, I got to be honest, we're not even halfway through the year, so there are a lot of films still expected to drop. And once they do, hopefully the numbers go even more, and entertainment scene is popping. That's what we love to see happen.
I'd love to see it. We'd love to see it.
Well, that is the biggest story, of course, on entertainment. I am Sam Dandy.
And that's the news tonight. But before we go, here's a reminder of our top stories. Central Bank of Nigeria keeps interest rates unchanged at 27.5% for a second time in a row. Senate passes for second reading bill seeking to establish agency to manage assets recovered from unlawful activities. And UK suspends trade talks with Israel over military conduct in Gaza, where hundreds of Palestinians were killed in recent days.